ערב טוב וברוכים הבאים למושב החמישי של הכנס הבינלאומי השני לחקר השואה והג'נוסייד. כותרת המושב שלנו היא היבטים תיאורטיים וספרותיים של ג'נוסייד. שמי אריה גרוניק ואני אשמש כיושב ראש של מושב זה, בו ייקחו חלק 3 מבכירי החוקרים בתחום. פרופסור ישראל טשרני מהמכון לשואה ולג'נוסייד בירושלים. לחקר השואה והג'נוסייד בירושלים. דוקטור אייזק לובלסקי מהמחלקה לסוציולוגיה, מדע, המדינה ולתקשורת באוניברסיטה הפתוחה. ופרופסור יאיר אורון, אף הוא מהמחלקה לסוציולוגיה, מדע, המדינה ולתקשורת באוניברסיטה הפתוחה. ראשון הדוברים הוא הפרופסור ישראל טשרני. פרופסור טשרני הינו המייסד והנשיא הראשון של האגודה הישראלית לתרפיה משפחתית, ובעבר שימש כנשיא האגודה הבינלאומית לתרפיה משפחתית. עם אחרים הוא ייסד ועמד בראש האגודה הבינלאומית לחוקרי ג'נוסייד. בשנת 2011 הוא זכה בפרס הנשיאותי מטעם נשיא ארמניה כאות הערכה על פועלו ארוך השנים להכרה בג'נוסייד הארמני ועל מחקריו בנושא הכחשת מקרי רצח עם. הוא פרסם ספרים ומאמרים רבים בתחומי התמחותו. נושא הרצאתו של פרופסור טשרני הערב הוא תיאוריה כוללת על הפסיכולוגיה של הכחשת הג'נוסייד. פרופסור טשרני יישא את דבריו באנגלית על פי בקשתו. פרופסור טשרני, בבקשה.
אני מתנצל, אבל אני ארצה הערב באנגלית לכבוד האורחים שלנו. תיקנתי אותך, כבוד היושב ראש, כשאמרת מכון לשואה, והוספתי את המילה לחקר השואה. הספר שלי שפורסם על ידי האוניברסיטה הפתוחה, אני עדיין מדבר עברית, sorry about that. The book that I published with the Open University is going to come out in an English edition, and I submitted a title, Could I Commit Genocide? And the editor wrote me last week saying that the salespeople have turned that title down, because they were entirely clear that I was thus suggesting that if you read the book, you will know how to commit genocide. A Goya Shikup is all I can say, but I have to work with the editor. Denial is a fascinating, perplexing, disgusting, and frightening subject. I'm both, as you heard, a psychologist and a genocide scholar, so it is particularly appropriate for me to research the subject of denials of genocide. I admit, incidentally, that in my looser moments at parties, I am capable of saying that I have 2 specializations, and they are marriage and genocide. On the subject of denial, in 2003, I published in the Journal of Genocide Research a typology of genocide denials that was updated a few years ago in a web magazine that our institute puts out. I've been lecturing on the subject in London, in Paris, in Athens, in Yerevan, and slowly but surely my goal has been to develop what I call a comprehensive theory of denials. And you have a handout now, a 1-page handout, I trust, which summarizes, as of now, the subjects that we have been analyzing in connection with understanding denials. Let there be no doubt, denials are not just the denials by Turkey of the Armenian genocide or of the Holocaust. Denials are practiced by an endless number of people. For example, Japan, Serbia, Russia, China, Sri Lanka, to name only a few countries. In 2008, Yair and I had the dubious pleasure opportunity to lecture in Istanbul And I chose for my lecture not to lecture them on their rotten denials of the Armenian genocide, but to sketch a series of cases of other people around the world who practice denial, and the absurdity of the denials just come right up at you as you listen to them. It ended up that the joke was on me. They didn't get the point. I want to convey, first of all, that denial is not only the practical self-defense of perpetrators and their descendants and followers. If you look at the chart, you will find that the last entry is called Innocent Deniers. I've published on that. And what that means is people who don't necessarily know the history, but nonetheless unconsciously join in the bigotry or approval of violence that are expressed in denials. The majority, in my opinion, the majority of deniers are such innocent deniers. And this leads us to some very powerful confrontations of the nature of us human beings. But let's go back to the beginning. The first categories, every one of them is enormously important, but there is by now a huge literature on them. The cover-up, the continuing cover-up by descendants of the perpetrators, a strategy for gaining power, an insult to victims and communities that is so painful, a celebration of violence, an effort to capture the record of civilization and transform it to one's own ideology. But what I'd like to do this evening is try to make a few comments about the next categories, which are less known. Beginning with the concept that denials, in the very process of denying the genocide that was, they are a threat. They are a contemporary threat. And where I and others thought at first that they were metaphoric threats, I increasingly believe that they also have a component of being very real threats. Note, for example, now real threats of a return to the same genocide and a continuation of it, or of genocidal actions against other peoples by the same perpetrator. Perpetrators of genocide have an amazing history of getting caught up in the joy of their rottenness and extending their victim populations. An example in our time, Erdogan, not that long ago, has threatened to expel the remaining Armenians from Turkey. Now, he has not done that yet, but Erdogan is quite busy with an enormous amount of violence to the Kurds, as you know. The next thing that I want to comment on certainly relates to my other home professional specialty, and that is, and this gives me pleasure, denials are equivalent to bona fide mental disturbances. If we look at the explicit content of denials, the claim that a major historical event, which the whole world knows took place, in fact never took place, this is madness. I was taught to identify that kind of madness in the very first year of my internship. The claim that the Armenians committed genocide against the Turks rather than the Turks to the Armenians. These are the ravings of madmen. They're counterfactual thinking. And in normal life, counterfactual thinking is easily recognized as psychiatrically disturbed. But we human beings have a strange convention. Once a political tag is attached to a crazy thought, it is allowed to play as if it is a competing idea that deserves consideration. Now, I'm perfectly aware that the concept that they are the equivalent of madness leads to all sorts of problems, including the fact that I don't want deniers to be gotten off from their responsibility because the poor bastards are mentally disturbed. This is a Western pill pool, but it really comes up. The point that I'm making is that denials are the equivalent of mental illness, and not that every denier is mentally ill. And I strongly believe that all denials have to be confronted not only for their content, but for their intrinsic immorality, nastiness, and self-serving at the price of the integrity of historical memory. Now I'm going to go to a more painful extension of this, which is that denials lead us, human beings, all of us, including us non-deniers, to a picture of a larger-than-life madness of our species in our universal readiness to destroy life. If I talk about a close to madness aspect of the human mind, I first of all am referring to a whole variety of thinking distortions, such as Daniel Kahneman and others comment on. I'm talking about stereotypal thinking. I'm talking about magical thinking, totalistic thinking. Just listen at your next university faculty meeting and see how many of these you hear. I'm talking about massive projections of our weakness onto others. I'm talking about our deep difficulty in discerning the difference between legitimate self-defense and violence that is in the name of self-defense but is based on a paranoid attribution to the other party. I'm speaking about our undue needs all over the place for excessive power. But the worst of all is the larger-than-life madness of the readiness of people everywhere to round up masses of people, torture them, and destroy them. Albert Camus said following World War II that all human beings have to choose whether they are available to be victims or executioners. And what I'm saying metaphorically is that each denial is metaphorically a reminder to us of the madness of the human being, and all of us are that human being. Now I come to a painful subject, which is that victim peoples also participate heavily in denials of genocides. And I have sketched here 4 different types of denials. And they will include, of course, my very deep criticism of a country that I live in and love very deeply, our Israel. Which reminds me, since I've always made it a point as a genocide scholar to mix a certain kind of humor of the absurd with the serious, painful work on genocide. Here is something by Armin Wegner. You remember him? The man who wrote a letter of protest to Wilson about the genocide of the Armenians, and wrote to Hitler a letter of protest about the genocide of the Jews. He got his due reward of a German concentration camp, you may not fear. And Wegner, who survived, although damaged and hurt, quotes an Armenian proverb, and I'm bringing it up now as I approach criticizing our state of Israel strongly. Says the proverb, whoever speaks the truth, says an Armenian proverb, has to have always at his disposal a saddled horse. My horse is waiting right nearby. The denials by victim peoples obviously include the denials of the genocide of other peoples, such as Israel's continuing shameful denial of the Armenian genocide, which we are hearing about in one way or another all day. I appreciated very much Harut Sassoonian's point that he differentiates between the people of Israel and overall our consensual sympathy and identification with the Armenian genocide versus our government. It's ours. But there are other kinds of denials by victim peoples. There are denials of co-victims in a genocide. I, for some years, have criticized the Armenian people for their denials of, which are now lessening and lessening, of their co-victims, the Assyrians, the Yazidis, the Greeks were major groups. There were also smaller groups, including some Jews. And I don't know if many of you know it, there were 2 beginning expulsions of Jews from Tel Aviv by the Turkish rulers in Palestine. I'll be damned if I know why that's not a living part of our Israeli Jewish history. And we Jews try talking about the Roma, the Gypsies, the Russian POWs at Yad Vashem, the homosexuals, as people who were killed in the Holocaust. And you will see scowls and anger. And if, God forbid, you are an employee of Yad Vashem, like a tour guide, and you have done a no-no like that, I know and have read, but I know also directly of people who simply have been dismissed for that. And the last one that I will mention today is the denials of genocidal massacres that a genocidal victim people in turn commit towards other people. Because the potential for committing genocide is everywhere. It's not equally everywhere, but it is intrinsically everywhere. And many, many peoples have succumbed to that potential. Since I must conclude, I want to conclude on an up note of a very beautiful development that is very much a therapy for a protective measure against denials. I was in Yerevan for the centennial observance in April, and I was stunned and deeply moved to learn that a few weeks before, the Armenian parliament, when they are legitimately totally concerned with their own memory, reaching the peak of the centennial, had passed a resolution defining December 9th as the day of commemoration of victims of all genocides. Takshivu tov. How wonderful. And then, not that long ago, a resolution by Armenia, to which, thank God, Israel was one of the co-sponsors, was passed by the United Nations, making December 9th the day to honor victims of genocide. The choice of the day, incidentally, is that that day is the anniversary of the adoption of the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide on December 9th, 1948. The adoption, not the original resolution. And I ask in conclusion, what's our date right now? Oh yeah, I have to turn on my lights when I drive, and my wife and I have to decide when to turn on the heating system. Yeah, December 9th is pretty soon, isn't it? I think we're even scheduling social events in our personal lives. I ask this December 9th, will Israel, that was a co-sponsor, join in the commemoration of the victims of genocides of all peoples? Toda rabba.